So we're glad to have you. I'm glad you could finally get one. I know you were looking for the link, and I know some of these things kind of, run into other people's other schedules. And I do have a question for the group before we kind of dive in. Would you all be open to doing this on like at 4:30 instead of 5:30?
No, I can't.
You can't?
I can.
5 o'clock, 4:30, I'm still answering.
So
Whatever.
5 o'clock would be better?
I think this
Five would
this
work.
time, this 5:30 time actually still works well for me.
I mean, 5 or 5:30, Michael.
Yeah, I'm with
Okay.
you.
Is better.
5 or
Like
5:30.
even after I get off of this, I've got to go back to work. Like, I'm not done working for the day. Like I've been working around the clock. So I'm just like I said today, I said, you know what? I am jumping on Michael's happy hour no matter what, even if I can't stay for long, because I've been wanting to do this for what, 4 weeks now. So yeah, later's better.
No, that's quite all right.
Is there
So,
anything
I
you
mean,
need in terms of?
Well, the other thing here, Michael, is, the earlier you go, the less likely people are going to have brown liquor. There's just kind of like this switch that turns on around 5:30 local time where, you don't get a side eye from your spouse, about having brown liquor.
Yep, brown liquor right here.
I see what happens in the down.
The haunting hour. Yeah.
What's driving the time change?
That's a good point.
Vodka's
you
a
have-
mid-afternoon drink, but no, you go bourbon. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. You don't want to have brown liquor before 5.
I'm drinking a Bordeaux, and that's okay.
That's why you go with
So
white liquor.
Vodka are okay because
people.
they're not brown.
Right?
Vodka.
Yeah, white liquor you
Vodka.
can start like at 9:30 in the morning. I mean,
Very true.
put a juice in
Tomato
it.
juice. There you go.
Holy crap.
The juice of the gods.
Or orange juice.
Or whatever juice
Well,
you
that's
need.
the mixer. Vodka and orange juice. Come on.
Do it straight from the bottle. That's my thing.
Yeah. That's funny. So, well, I don't know if more people are going to be joining us or not, but why don't we get started on the topic? I appreciate the feedback. I'll probably end up starting it at 5-ish next week and try and see if that works with maybe the East Coast a little bit better. And maybe shut it down to after an hour instead of going an hour and a half, but we always seem to go an hour and a half.
That sounds good.
So looking for feedback. Somebody talk to me.
Well, I think that sounds good. I mean,
Okay.
do what's best
So
for you.
5 o'clock, 5 to 6 central.
Yeah.
That works. That can work.
Let's try
Whoever can make it makes it. Whoever can't. I think it's
Yeah,
awesome.
whoever can. Exactly. So, Andrew was on a couple of weeks ago. We had a great time, and I thought he just brings just an interesting perspective on analytics. And so we kind of want to keep, a lot of people are always interested in analytics and what is analytics. So we're in a real high level, basic conversation about how analytics leads us to, influence our decisions, and that those can be decisions that are made personally, professionally. More so, this will be about professional. But even if you're in a job search, I think, and I don't know if Andrew would agree or not, but that is something that can probably apply to that, don't you think?
Well, I think what's interesting about executing a job search and then using analytics, or better yet, forget analytics for a second, just using data to help you make decisions is going to save you time. It's going to avoid you from maybe going into a pitfall that you didn't know that existed, and it certainly will, understanding what data has been analyzed and reviewing that information before you make decisions, helps you understand when to send emails, when to follow up, when to apply for jobs. All these things have been studied that say, when's the best time to post, but when's the best time to apply? And I think that just having a mindset that is aware of the data and aware of how you make decisions using that information is a good thing, really, in any part of it, business or government work or whatever. I think it's just, it's the only, math is the only universal language. We all speak the same language of math, and it doesn't matter if it's English, Spanish, Chinese. 1 + 1 = 2, and that's universal.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I think so. When you look at Andrew, when you look at analytics, I mean, everyone uses that term out there and throws it out there. But when it all boils down to it, isn't it just data? It's just data points, right?
Well, I mean, let's talk about that. So I think that analytics is really broken up into, I want the answer to a question, right? That's what analytics does. Analytics is really about taking a math problem and turning it into a business problem, and then saying, oh, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about this business problem and use math to solve it. Within that, there's different types of analytics. So sometimes we're asking questions that are how many, or when did it happen, or is this weird, or is what's going to happen next. All of those types of questions are types of analytics. Is it weird? How many did occur? What's the average? Those are all descriptive analytics. What should we do next to avoid a problem? That's prescriptive analytics. What's wrong? That's diagnostic. While what's likely going to happen next is predictive, right? And I think that when we think about being a recruiter or an HR person or a job seeker or an operator or a supply chain person, doesn't matter, you're ultimately asking those questions about your activity and about your business all the time. The question is are you using math to answer them, right? Is that normal? Well, you can say, I think so. Or you can say, well, our average behavior is this. Our minimum behavior is that. The maximum behavior is this. Here's how often we deviate from that. Those are more educated and data-centric ways of answering that question. So that's what analytics is. It's, recruiting analytics is turning a business question into a math question, while recruiting analytics is turning recruiting questions into math questions for recruiting, and so on and so forth.
That's great. Now I put a link out there, kind of analytics 101. So, so we have people representing different industries. So we've got sales, we've got IT, we've got HR, we've got recruiting. Did I miss anybody?
Carlos is
HR.
supply chain.
Hey, Andrew, I've got a quick question. You mentioned the different types of analytics. Can you give me an example of what prescriptive analytics might be?
Sure.
And I guess for lives as it pertains to recruiting.
So a prescriptive analytics would determine we should do certain things, right? Because we determine that there's a causation, but because I do this, something else downstream may occur, right? Or has a high likelihood to occur. So as an example, prescriptive analytics has told us that if we respond to candidates faster, our candidate experience rating will increase. Okay, on a scale of say 1 to 5.
If then statement?
What?
If then?
It can be, right? But the prescriptive analytics is about if I know that my candidate experience is going to be higher with a faster response time, I then run analytics that say, how do I measure the response time of my recruiters? What are the targets? And what are the alerts or the triggers that would go off if I had that problem? think about it almost in the world of when people ask me about prescriptive analytics, I always remind them about proximity warnings with aircraft, right?
Okay.
Not a good idea for two aircraft to be right next to each other, ever, right?
Right.
So air traffic control is built on one concept: don't have them next to each other, right? So all the alerts and everything are built on when things get too close, right? Because we know when they get too close, accidents happen. That's what we want to think about with prescriptive. We want to think, what are the things that we need to measure so we don't have a proximity warning going off?
It can also be used for setting expectations with hiring managers in terms of the market for a particular kind of employee, and what is, I remember looking at the number of people who are strategy consultants in the Dallas area, for example, so you can, or making decisions about whether or not to open up new offices based upon the concentration of potential employees with that particular skill set. So it can be used in that way too.
Yeah, there are ways to, the other thing is to reinforce training. Prescriptive analytics can work if we want to make sure that our teams are executing new processes or new behaviors. We know that those are good for them. We've designed the training. Now the question is, are they executing? So you set up analytics and measurement to test on exactly that. In the world of supply chain and manufacturing, this is all so normal, right? Because it saves lives, or it avoids spillage, or it ensures on-time delivery and all those things. A lot of those mechanisms are important in HR. We don't tend to be as pointed as some of the other parts, other functions in the business. But I'm an old engineer, so old habits die hard.
Good.
Yeah, no, that's great. So where are we? So, because we got someone that's in business development, someone that's in IT, Elizabeth, are you in IT, or what do you do?
Yes, I'm a senior leader in IT, and I've worked extensively with big data, data analytics, predictive analytics. I spent 6 years at Walmart, so you can imagine the amount of data we had to deal with, and data drove everything we did.
Right.
Really drove everything.
Absolutely. So, and welcome to the call. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
So,
and also I think, when I look at companies, usually where I find the opportunity for there to be a competitive advantage is the use of their data, so they can understand their clients better, so they can understand their own processes better, they can streamline and automate things that don't work well. I mean, it's all about data.
no, absolutely. So Andrew, to that point, like, if you had to pick, for lack of a better word, an occupation, so HR, IT, sales, blah, 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 who's using analytics the best right now? Like, which teams?
I would say the people who are probably closest to the original manufacturing of a product or a service. So if I'm on a product side, I've got my supply chain organization that's manufacturing, that's delivering, that they're doing third-party logistics or they're doing reverse logistics, and they're bringing things back. They have to track stuff. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I have a device that can scan a box. And then that box is being scanned along the way. And so there's a lot of data that normally lives there. Second to that are people who offer services, whether it's technology or financial or otherwise, that are highly transactional. And those operators are delivering that service or that license or that software product, and they're watching carefully how their customers are using it, whether or not their customers are interfacing with certain modules and so on. So that group, let's call it the operations group. has had to been savvy for a long time in order for them to produce different products or different services in advance. Right behind them, maybe a little bit better, is the marketing department. And I want to be clear, I think it's different than sales, right? But the marketing department and maybe even the acquisition and strategic management groups, they're crunching through all kinds of interesting data around consumer behavior to help inform a business on how to develop products or where they're going to go. These organizations are really, really advanced. But Michael, what's interesting is in the world of software and in the world of service, a lot of the times the product or the service are very human dependent. So, Facebook might be crunching through, a lot of data, but they understand their workforce and what their coders are coding and how they're producing projects and their interaction within Slack and all those things. So sometimes we don't develop a widget, it's virtual, but it's humans who do that work. And so I think more companies are getting savvier there than they had maybe say 5-7 years ago.
And so I don't know, what do you guys want to know more? I mean, Andrew could sit here and talk, but I'd like a more interactive conversation.
Yeah.
So what questions do y'all have for him that you could throw out to him? Just unmute yourself and ask him questions. His focus is really in the HR and recruiting space. Is that right? Or do you do it for everybody?
Most of the work that I've done in the last decade has been around workforce development and recruiting, right? Okay. So companies are asking me to help them figure out, to answer his questions around their workforce. Occasionally that bleeds into where should we build our facilities? Maybe that bleeds into how should our drivers change their routing, right? Things like that. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, I love to tell you it's highly sophisticated. Most companies can't even count how many employees they have on a daily basis.
So, yeah. I think a question that might be relevant to anyone who's looking for a job is when you are looking at where opportunities might be, where the bullseye is for your particular expertise, and how do you go about using data to determine that?
Well, I mean, so when we're thinking about a job search, typically what we're looking for are we want to think about our job search in a concept of attributes in terms of data. So we have all kinds of things that we want to do, right? Let's just say that I wanted to run workforce analytics for NASA, right? Or another highly technical company. Well, there's any number of attributes that I have to use in my research process to help me find companies. Now, some I might know off the top of my head, but I'm going to use search tools to look for certain attributes. And you need to start thinking about what are the attributes that you want. So what type of science, what type of company, how big, where are they located, what does the management look like, and so on and so forth. And so I think then when you do your searches, you're now searching based on these very finite attributes to focus your search. What I find, I've been teaching at NYU for a long time, and I teach on how to find a job to students. And what we want to use data for is to not waste our time, right? It's really easy to spend an entire day applying to jobs. The question is, were those the right ones for you, right? Because effort and activity doesn't necessarily yield automated results. So what you want is you want to search by these attributes and have that data conversation with yourself. And then say, does this company have this, and this?
Well, and then the question is, what are the best tools for you to use to search for those attributes?
Well, I mean, I think one thing you need is you probably need a tracking mechanism yourself. Okay. So I'm a big fan of people using, whether it's Outlook or some sort of communication tool that has tagging associated with it. Maybe it's Outlook, maybe you want to just use an Excel spreadsheet. That's fine. But I think tagging allows you to take a contact, say like in LinkedIn, and tag it a certain way and say, I know that company or that contact has these 4 or 5 tags, and that's part of my search process, right? And I'm agnostic when it comes to project management tools or tracking tools. You can use all kinds of things, but if you don't track with attributes, what it ends up doing is it's all in your head, right? And then you can't track anything. You can't track whether or not, you might want to become a data analyst for this type of company, and it has these 5 attributes, and you apply to 10 jobs, maybe that's 100 jobs, and you get no result back. But meanwhile, you apply to 100 jobs over here with different attributes and you get interviews. That's a very telling story. What was going on with the 5 attributes over here that didn't happen over here? And maybe it's because, all those jobs are not are far away from me, or are in a different time zone, as an example. Does that mean that your approach should be different then in order to get people to react differently? Maybe they're looking at your resume and they're seeing Dallas, Texas. Oh, that person would never move here. Well, maybe your approach should be different for non-Dallas or non-localized messaging, and that would increase your likelihood of, that would increase your response rate. Only way you're going to know that is by tracking your attributes. Is that helpful, Joy?
Yeah, no, I thought it would be a helpful question for.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I have a question for you, Andrew. So one of the things, so this is more from, I guess, so one of the things I find is that most companies, I mean, honestly, they're horrible at telling their story about what they're looking for, though, because 95% of the companies still post really, honestly, shitty job descriptions. And I'm pretty passionate about that. So I'm an extreme marketer when it comes to that. But the thing is that's the issue, though, right? Is that they don't tell their story. And so honestly, attributes, I don't think so that's the challenge from the candidate side, right? Is the company's looking for these attributes, but they do a really crappy job of articulating them in their job. And so, Joy might be applying for them and they're like, we're looking for these attributes, but it's like, Joy doesn't really freaking know because they don't articulate them, right? So it's kind of like they're going through her resume and they're like, Joy doesn't have them. So I guess I'd be interested on your take from that, from an analytical standpoint, because it's like, they're not, I mean, some companies are trying to do that. That's what we're trying to do with recruitment marketing, but we talk about it, but we're not making it happen. I mean, I see a lot of talk, but I don't see it happening. So I'd like to see your viewpoint on that.
Yeah. So look, job ads and thereby job descriptions, they are wanting. That's for sure. Right. These are not, by and large, these are not great documents. Okay.
Yeah.
I laugh because people say, Andrew, come and help us figure out how to take our job descriptions and do automated matching with our resumes so we don't have to do the work of that. And I say, you are familiar with the garbage in, garbage out, cliche, right? And they're like, oh yeah. I said, yeah, because let's talk about the garbage in. That's your job descriptions.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's why you get to, by the way, you have to make sure the retainer check has cleared before I get to say things.
Yeah.
But when I say attributes, don't forget what the company is broadcasting.
Sure.
Right?
Okay. Very good.
I'm talking about what you can find.
Okay.
Right. like you found, like, you know, for me, I'll use NASA as the example, right? That's one of my like dream jobs. Like if they gave me the call, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll help you guys find astronauts. I'll
Okay.
figure that out. We'll move, right? But it's because it hits certain things that I want, right? And I've done the research on it's a project-based environment. I've seen that. They have development, they have smaller teams, all these things that I've been able to research say I work well in those environments.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about what an employment branding expert has put into a video and paid somebody to really make look beautiful.
Yes.
That's important, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm not saying it's bad, but what you can find and you can replicate as evidence becomes attributes. And then that's what you want to go after. But on job descriptions, you know, most I think you guys all, you know, you guys have seen data like this. Most of the time resumes are looked at for 15 seconds. There's any number of algorithms or automated matching tools that are being used. Is there there's the jury is out on whether or not you should change your resume to match a job description. Okay. What I would say is if you knew that they were using an automated matching service, if you had found that out, like they were using like Hiring Solved or something like that, that's an interesting dialogue around, I'm going to deliberately change my resume because I know they're using a feature that does the matching. And I want to rise up to a higher level of match than those who are competing with me for the job.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have,
Jury is out on that. Jury is out on that, though.
Go
I'd
ahead,
like,
Tish.
well, I got a couple thoughts here, and I've been doing about 200 resumes a year on average for the past 9 years. And I want to tell you what the candidates are saying, and then let's talk about attributes. The average person is not going to sit and do this analytical report to find what the best fit is for them. And what most of the candidates I know, I've heard it all, and I'm in the recruiting industry. So I hear from them saying, hey, recruiters aren't calling me back. Why? And I believe, and I know because I have a 95% placement rating on my resume, is that they don't know that keywords equal being picked up, being looked at by a recruiter. Well, they are starting to now because people like me are letting them know, hey, if you don't have this in your resume, the recruiter's not going to guess and they're not going to go, no, they only have 7 seconds to 30 seconds to review your resume. I tell my clients to call into companies where they want to work and talk to hiring managers directly. And it works for them because let me tell you, 70% of the jobs I know are not posted. My company was hiring me for the admin assistant. I don't even remember the job. I obviously didn't read the job description. I applied willy-nilly, and they created a job for me as a researcher. And here I am 9 years later, and I know my numbers. So it's
How
worth
big is
it
your
then.
company, Trish?
So I think that the candidates aren't going to do this big analytical. I think if they know that they can call in and talk to a recruiter on a Thursday or Friday when they're in a good mood because it's the end of the week versus a Monday or Tuesday when you're getting in and it's busy, how do you overcome this analytics when the average, they're not going to do that. They're just,
You know, I'll counter that with this. If you're going to track anything, you're going to track the number of favors that you're turning in and converting. Okay. Resume submissions don't mean much, but me asking Michael, I'm looking for
Yes.
a gig. I think these 3 companies are interesting. And I know that you know people at 2 of them, right? I need a solid favor. I need you to help me get in there. What do you think? can I turn in a favor with you? And you
Yeah, that's
count
gonna
up how
work.
many times you've asked that question,
Yeah.
and you count up how many people have delivered on a favor. And
That
then
worked
you
for you,
count
Andrew.
up
Yeah,
how
but-
many things have converted from that favor into interviews, into referrals. And if you're going to count anything, count that. I don't care how many jobs you applied for. I don't care, whatever. How many favors did you ask for? And how many did you get? And how many yielded an advanced position? And
Well,
that's a
see-
lot of, and believe it or not, that's going to get you work. That's
Isn't
going to get you work.
all useful for the last 6 years and not useful for today?
I don't think a lot of seekers know that.
Oh, well, here's the deal though. You're assuming that I'm calling in favors, but see, people like me for my resumes, I'm like, hey, where do you want to work? Here's how you do Boolean to find emails and phone numbers. So candidates are starting to figure out, oh, this is how you find an email and phone number. I don't know if the calling, I would like to see, and I'd love to track it for the next year for myself personally. How many companies did you call into and how many company contacts did you have to talk to without me, Trish, calling in a favor to a recruiter? I would love to be able to track that and send that to you this next year and say, hey, this is how successful they were on calling. Because I don't know any of the recruiters that they're calling because I'm like, here's a Boolean, here's how you find it.
Trish, are you a resume writer or what do you do? Because you mentioned an admin, but what do you do?
I am a sourcer full time and I write resumes. I tell my clients, this is how a recruiter is looking for you in their application tracking system. If you don't have these things according to the job description, you're not going to get picked up. So I'm writing it from a sourcer's point of view and telling the candidates, because they don't know, they say we're frustrated, they don't call me. I said, that's right, they're not mind readers. If they don't see these keywords and I tell them what I do as a sourcer, you're not going to get picked up in their application tracking system. So I'm writing the resume from a backwards point of view.
Jim, you had
But
a
it's
question
also-
in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So tell us, Jim, why you said that won't work in for today's market. Why is that?
Well, there's a couple things. One is that most of the advice we give is very specific, and we have to remember that. The advice I give on getting a job as a digital marketer or software sales or sourcing does not work for an executive, which is not the same as a restaurant guy. So almost all the advice you read or hear online, it's that very, very top percent. Andrew can call in favors. Very few other people can. And when you're looking for a job, as many of the people here are, they realize it's not like that. The bigger problem is that a lot of the advice we have now is built in the last 6 years. And Andrew, this is my question for you. At a certain point is, we've got all this data. It's already bad enough in HR. We have horrible data because we don't know how to clean it. And nobody knows what the word data means, but everybody's data driven. The problem is can we actually say that anything we've learned in the 6 years applies to today? I can tell you in terms of what we're going through now, what I would have told someone 3 months ago doesn't work today.
Oh,
There's a whole range of emotions and abilities that we're struggling with. So for things like job descriptions, I had this great thing I was going to throw up, but I'm not going to bring it up now. If you're looking at the job description written today, the problem is that companies write those for a reason. They're not supposed to be sexy. Go look at someone who had the job before, find a way to access a resume, looked at LinkedIn and see what they say about the job. And if you're gonna alter your resume,
What their backgrounds
alter it to what it was supposed to be, was not what an HR person wrote or what they wrote for compliance to not be sued. This is primarily for big companies, but look at what someone wrote on LinkedIn about what they actually did. In terms of job descriptions.
Fantastic advice.
Thank
So
you.
I use the same method. I'm like, if you want to be a cybersecurity expert working in Washington, D.C. at an agency, right? You want to go work for whatever. Go find people who work in that work role, find them on LinkedIn, find their resume, do Boolean logic, do a bunch of Googling, whatever. Get some resumes of, oh, here are people who not only work in that organization, but have been promoted in that organization.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to take their profile, and like 6 of them, and I'm going to look at my own LinkedIn profile, my own resume, what's not there, what should be there, what attribute, because they might be talking a language about project management, certain, whatever it is, scrumming. I don't care what it is. And the question is if there's 10 people talking about using agile methodology on their resume to be successful, and you don't have that on your resume, and you're in there and you want that job, well, maybe that's worth a revisit, right? That's where the data can kind of help you understand these, when I say attributes, pick up those things and be like, I don't have that on my profile. I don't have that in my talk track. Meanwhile, you might be working in Jira every day doing stand-up meetings. You just didn't think to put it on your resume.
Take a look at the job you want. Go search everybody who has that job title and find out the job that they had beforehand. That will help you get the next one. If you want to know what you're supposed to do next, go look at everybody who has your job title as their last one and figure out what they went to next. That's a way to use data on LinkedIn to figure out, because I'm going to do something that's been done before. That's how I convince a hiring manager to do it.
Right.
So if I know that I'm hiring from Samsung, it's easier to get into Samsung than it is the cybersecurity place, but they hire a bunch of them. Figure out where they came from or make friends with those people so you can get referred, as opposed to simply saying, I'm sure I can do it. And that's where that study gets into.
And the hiring manager is often saying they're looking for people with coming from those companies. So
see who they like. I mean, they know who they like and where those people come from. And sometimes, I mean, you'll just be able to tell, like, oh, they all come from, Fiserv. Well, or you might be screwed, or you have to figure out where they want.
Or if they don't, look at the competitors to their companies and who they're hiring, and just simply say, I noticed the backgrounds of of people in similar positions that your competitors are hiring. Well, I have that background, and you might want to consider me too. So
yeah.
Well, and Teresa, you're hitting on something that is almost, leveraging almost predictive analytics, which is what's likely for me to happen, right? So I'll date myself over a decade, right? When Frito-Lay was hiring supply chain folks, when I was hunting for them, they only wanted people out of like 10 different companies, and that was it.
Thing. CPG people, I work for one of them. They're all like that. They only want people out of certain schools, and believe me,
you're right. And so, if you were, look, I ran staffing at Honeywell, right? Which means that everybody at GE was like asking me to come work there and all those things, right? There are those patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And if you learn those patterns and say, hey, I know that there's a hiring manager over at this company, and I've looked at the sales folks, the software sales folks, and they're kind of like a really diverse group.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think that was an attribute that, wow, the sales force is a diverse group of people in terms of their academics, their background, their companies, their tenure, all these things.
Yeah.
I myself would fit in with that group because I'm also diverse in my profile.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hey, look, I grew up at Pepsi and I was in their management track and all these things. Well, do a quick search on, think about like the old school, like General Electric FMP program. Find out who hired all those folks.
Yeah.
And then, hey, I was in that program too, or a like program. I want to apply to those companies because I know they hire people like me.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you take it one step further. When you're in the interview or you're talking to someone for networking, you bring up what you researched. They may not know. They may never have thought about that. And you providing that shows you're researching, you're connected, you understand what's going on. How do I not talk to this person?
Right.
So use what you have. Don't just look at it and put it in the back. Actually talk through the process of it, because so few candidates actually plan out what they're doing. And if you have someone who likes that, they're going to love it versus I'm good, hire me. First, look what I did. I'm already looking at ways of what you're doing and helping.
Think about the sell, right? When you're 2 steps away from the hiring manager and you're talking to that person who's your connector, right? The storyline you want that connector to give to the hiring manager is, you know, I met Andrew like in a bar, and believe it or not, does this, does that, knows Jira, you know, man, I know we got some openings. You should talk to this guy, right? That's the sell. But if it's deliberate, it all of a sudden becomes, this person reached out to me. They're well researched. They were talking our language. I know we get a bunch of crappy applicants for once. Why don't we talk to someone real who took the time? And believe it or not, that's just enough to let you get in the door, right? Not all the time,
Yeah.
but more often than.
Good point.
So,
Andrew,
Go ahead.
I kind of a two-part. Okay, so when you were talking about the analytics, as a job seeker, my limited resource is my time, right? And so I can't put in a ton of applications and network with a ton of people. It's just not possible to do all the things at once. What research have you seen about what percentage of time you should be spending on what activities? And is that different but depending on your age? I know you were talking about the fact that you teaching people who are in school, those people coming out of school are different than me because I've been out of school for a little while.
Now, I'll tell you that. So the students that I teach actually are in the continuing education program. So the majority of them are over the age of 35. So occasionally,
I'm a little over that.
right. So occasionally I teach undergrads or grad students, but it doesn't happen that often.
Okay.
But I think in terms of how you invest your time, I think you're going to have to really listen to the results of those of those investments. So you're going to take some time and, you know, think about the end game are these conversions. The conversions are, I got an interview, I had an in-depth conversation with a hiring manager, right? Those are your wins, right? You know, obviously the job offers are the bigger wins, but you want to make sure that you're splitting your campaigns into, if I do this for an hour, does that put me in a position to potentially get conversations with a hiring manager, right? And I think that so I'd like to see you use a multifaceted approach to try to achieve the hiring manager conversations, right? And you just need to pay attention to how you're getting them. Asking for favors is one. Applying to jobs is another, where you don't know people. Applying to jobs at the recommendation of somebody else is a third, right? Going to networking sessions and having pointed discussions is a fourth. I would split them somewhat equally for several days and then kind of let some data come back at you that says, you know, I spent a couple of hours on the phone talking with people to try to network. And did I get an interview out of that? Did I get a new hiring manager conversation? Either you did or you didn't. I'm going to spend a couple of hours applying to jobs where I don't know the folks. I don't know the company. I don't have a leverage point, but I'm swiping right. I'm filling out applications. Okay. Did I get results? Right? It's this back and forth. Start equally and then realize that you might make some adjustments in about a week or two based on the results. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I see that there are some areas where it's tough to find out where, okay, if I have a conversation with somebody, I can track whether or not they gave me a referral to somebody, whether or not they connected me with somebody who helped me, that sort of thing. But if I go through, and for example, Michael gave me the idea of putting together a 4-week calendar for LinkedIn for my content so that I was being clearer with my focus for people who are looking at me. And I think that's really valuable. but when I put out a post, how do I know whether or not it is actually leading to a job?
You don't. You don't know that. There's no way. And I wouldn't look at it that, hey, I'm doing this just to be out on LinkedIn so that people will recognize me. So the mentality should be, when you're on a platform like LinkedIn, which is a lot different than being on a platform like TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, right? LinkedIn is it's the purpose of giving. That's what, well, they might, you know, their vision, LinkedIn's vision is us giving them money, but seriously, us, you know, LinkedIn is a place where people, it's a sharing. It's basically a Slack channel that came first and is not as complicated to use, right? So you should go with the intention, Larry, that if you make that decision that you want to be, you know, you want to post, not troll on LinkedIn, or, you know, for the lack of a better word, troll, but engaging, commenting, then you probably shouldn't be doing LinkedIn just for the sake of finding a job, because like I said, there's no guarantee to it. But I can tell you, and Andrew, tell me if I'm wrong, the more you post out there, this is, what is this, predictive analytics? The more you post out there and put out there that's valuable content, there is an opportunity for a recruiter or a hiring manager or somebody to see you and say, huh, I want to connect, follow, and possibly talk to her about an opportunity.
Well, I think that over time, that's certainly true. Driving intellectual content on LinkedIn and then referencing it can solidify the sell that you're pitching, right? I have a third party place that has all this information. You can see that I'm constantly talking about this, or I've got a mode of operation. I think it creates a chain of evidence. I don't think necessarily that the more you use social media, the faster you get a job. I'd be cautious about a statement like that. I do believe the more you post on social media with richer content, the richer your engagement will be with people who see that content, right? Hey,
And you got to,
I saw something you posted. That was cool. Great, let's talk about it. Versus whatever, right? I mean, you know, everyone uses social media a little different, but rich content on LinkedIn can help you in a professional conversation for sure.
So I have a question for our non-HR and recruiting professionals, and that would be Ray and Elizabeth and Rafiq and Amara. You're not in HR, right? You're on mute. You're on mute. Can't hear you. So, so anyway, what questions do you
I'm
have?
a person.
Because, oh, that's okay. Are you in IT? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, Ray, from a sales perspective, and Elizabeth from an IT, and Amara from a software development perspective, I mean, what are some of y'all's questions about data? I mean, is this all resonating with you? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think some
Yes.
of what Andrew's already shared has been helpful, and some of the other people's comments have been helpful as well. One of the things that Andrew mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, which we haven't touched on yet, was the best time to apply for a job. Is there a best time on, you know, when you see, how do you know what the timing is? Because you see jobs and, you know, there's maybe 2 people have applied so far. Is that the best time to apply? Or if they've already got 250 applicants, is it even worth bothering with?
So, okay, so that's an excellent question. And do you go by Elizabeth? Excellent. My sister is Beth, so
Yes,
I ask questions like that. So if you have data that, for example, LinkedIn will give you some insight on whether or not there's been so many applicants, et cetera. That's a good example. That might give you an understanding of, well, maybe that juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? 250 people have applied to this job. Well, that also could be because all that's required is a one-click apply, right?
Right.
So before you kind of look and see the number, understand the application mechanism, right? Because if all it costs you is a click, then like even the debate isn't worth your time, right? Might as well apply. What you'll find is that the number of people tends to go down the more manual a process is when that feedback is given on LinkedIn, as an example. When it comes to the best time to apply, let's talk about the best time to post. The best time to post a job is Wednesday morning. Okay? Why is that? Because on Wednesday, the job gets posted on a job board. Wednesday night, the aggregators like Indeed pick it up using API technology, and then they post it usually somewhere between Thursday and Friday, depending upon any number of variables. And what ends up happening is then come Friday, people who now are coming into the weekend see a freshly posted job and they have time to apply to it. And then come Monday, you usually have a swarm of candidates. So I tell our clients, your job should be in your applicant tracking system and public so people can see it by Wednesday at noon Eastern time. Okay? Now, best time to apply. The best time to apply is a freshly posted job between that Wednesday and Sunday window. Usually that's somewhere between Friday afternoon and Sunday. Why? The most attention that you will get from a recruiter is on the first edition of them looking through the resumes after they successfully posted it, which happens to be that Monday. Now, this is all the assumption that they're posting on Wednesday. Not everybody does.
No.
Right? A freshly posted job, right, soon thereafter is your highest likelihood, okay? What I can tell you is that the data supports that if you interview somebody within 7 days of a job being posted, you reduce your time to fill by 39 days. And if you do it within 14 days, you reduce it by 21 days on average. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that you should try to apply for a job soon after it's been posted. So you want to look for that date of posting if you can. You want to understand its age. That might not be on the job board that you're looking at. You might have to go to, say, the employer's job board, and there might be a date there, right? You have to kind of look around. When does that stop? After about a week and a half, there's kind of like this this limbo period between like day 14 or day 10 and like day 60, where candidates have come in and the job for whatever reason is still posted, but they're not really looking at candidates anymore. Not really, right? They got their candidates, they're kind of rolling, right? They got interviews are being scheduled, but for whatever reason, recruiters have decided to not unpost the job. It drives me bananas.
It's not filled yet until someone starts. That's why.
But
No, because you don't want to go back out. I mean, it happens. Who's a recruiter?
Yeah,
it happens.
but the problem is
They freaking start.
The false hope that exists in that scenario.
I do want to add to some of this on what really I'd love to share with you on whether you should apply via LinkedIn or the job site. I will give you some insight into how this works. So, but after you get done, so.
But
I have a question on that, Andrew.
Yeah.
If what you're saying on this is basically for a job seeker, it might not be worth applying for a job that has been posted maybe say 10 days ago? Is that what I'm getting out of it? Or
Yeah, what I would say is I would look at when it was posted, and if several weeks, let's just say it's 21 days. If 21 days have elapsed, right? Maybe 14. And there's a lengthy job application in front of you, say 30 minutes, right? I'm going to tell you, you might want to spend your time on a fresher job with those 30 minutes.
I don't know.
Golly, 30 minutes.
Hold on, Teresa. I'm not saying hope isn't a decent strategy.
That's too long for a job application.
But Trish, there are plenty of organizations that have that.
30 minutes, I'm not. That's too much time.
I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to tell you.
In the last 6 months, I'm just telling you.
I'm going to tell you right now. If and when
Hey.
I apply for positions, if I see Taleo on there, I just bug off. I don't care how great the company is. I think the Taleo process is just, it drives you batty. If I see Smart Recruiters, if I see Lever, if I see Greenhouse Jobs, Q Jumpers, I'm like, all right, go.
Yeah, if it's
But
only
isn't
going to
Taleo
take you
the
a
most
handful of
used
minutes,
one?
or it's a swipe right process, you're already there, right?
Right.
You're already
Oh, yeah.
there. You might as well execute the work. But if you've got a longer application process, and so remember, I do a lot of government work. If you want a long application process, I can show you a lot of jobs that have a long application process in the government, right? So if you see that there's one that's not freshly printed and it looks like a longer process, I think your time would be better spent somewhere else if it's not that freshly pressed. Here's where that changes. If the job receipt is over like 60 days, 2 months, and it's still out there, right? There's something to be said about why is the job still open, right? Now, these are broad numbers. If this was an hourly job, that might be because they keep it open all the time. It might be, but between 60 and 90 days is when most jobs are done and they're taken off of job boards. So when you see one that's older, that might be an indicator of trouble. They're legitimately having trouble finding applicants, right? And the best way to look at that is to look at the other jobs that are right next to it on the applicant tracking system at the employer. If you see a lot of freshly pressed jobs, but then like all of a sudden there's a job that's like 90 days old, that should almost make you pause and say, I wonder if they're having trouble with that one, because I got plenty of data in front of me that says the majority of these jobs are only like less than 30 days old. Why is this one like 120 days old? All right. Maybe that's worth an investigation. But all things being equal, a freshly pressed job is your best in long-term and major investment. If it's a swipe right 3-minute process, that kind of thing, then it's 3 minutes.
Hey,
Right,
Andrew,
but-
Andrew,
Go
you
ahead,
want to talk about an outdated process? I've applied for civil service jobs and have been, accepted for positions. And I'm telling you, they interview people and they know they aren't going to hire you. It's like a big time waste. Someone needs to like overhaul the civil service GS job application process like soon.
I'll work on
Well,
it.
I know, here's one thing. So I know that like, Indeed, you were talking about Indeed, right? Sometimes though, Indeed doesn't index their jobs from my understanding. So sometimes you'll find a job like when I was working at the hospital last year, they go, hey, what is this position? I go, what do you mean? They go, well, yeah, this position showing up on our Indeed feed. I go, but we filled that position. They go, well, how do you get Indeed to take it down? And for some reason, they can't take it down, right? It has to wait out its period. So what's the best way around? So
Yeah.
how do you know if a position hasn't been filled and it says 90 to 120 days, or it's been out there, more than 3 months? Do you just say, yeah, they probably filled it? Like, what's that? You talked about it a little bit, but what's that fine line?
Yeah. So
To go,
all things being
hey.
equal, if you can apply directly at a company, okay, if you can apply directly at a company, and the process is not very taxing on your time, that's my overall recommendation. There's any number of so one of the reasons is because if you apply on, say, Indeed or Career Builder, Monster, you may or may not actually go through some questioning that the company tends to ask in their applicant tracking system that might actually put a star rating or automatically grade you to draw the attention of a recruiter. So if I apply on Indeed, that might come into my ATS, my applicant tracking system, without any kind of assessment. Somebody's applied to the job. Okay. But if I apply directly online at Samsung, then maybe they asked me a handful of questions, and now I have a different rating through some sort of level of automation in that applicant tracking system, and I draw the eye of the recruiter a little bit more, or at least earlier, right?
So let me ask this about that though, because there are some jobs that, the company's policy may be to post all the jobs on their internal career site, right? But they've got some of those jobs that they're really expecting an external recruiter to help them with. And so if you do post internally, it may get no attention. I mean, what you really need to know is who's actually doing the work to find the right people for the job. And that sometimes is a mystery.
Yeah, there's, it's kind of one of those things where, so, I used to drive my recruiters crazy when I was running recruiting, because I would tell my agencies, and this is an unusual thing, but I would say, okay, agency, you're going to help me with this. You're going to have a headhunter. You're going to help me with this job. Oh, by the way, I'm sending you all the resumes that come in from my applicant tracking system, and you look at them, right? And you get full credit. I'll pay you all the money. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, because I want the same. I want you to pay attention to everybody who's interested in this job. Now, I'm not saying I was alone in that concept, but I'm pretty sure I was rare in that concept. A lot of times what happens is if a job is assigned to an agency, when people apply to that job directly on a website, they're coming into a controversy that they don't know exists. There's an agency that wants to get paid. There's an HR manager who may or may not want to pay the agency. And now there's a candidate in the middle. So what you might want to do is take the job title and a handful of the paragraphs, or maybe maybe look for something on the job description that you would think is unique. Drop it into Google and see if it comes up on an agency's website or on a LinkedIn post or something like that from, some random agency in Texas or wherever, right? That might be an indicator that, wow, they've sourced this out to an agency. Now I can either go to that agency and say, hey, I'm really good at this. Why don't you make some money off of placing me? Or you might say, there's an agency on this. Why would I apply to the job directly, right? But it also gives you the opportunity, Elizabeth, to maybe do some hunting to find out who the hiring manager is, who's in charge of the job, and make the phone call and say, hi, John, or hi, Sally. I saw your job, but I noticed that XYZ recruiting agency also posted it. I'm not quite sure who to talk to. Would you mind helping me? Can I enlist your help in making sure that I apply correctly to your organization? I'm really excited about this opportunity. Click. A good manager is going to call you. Like a good
Making
manager.
a bypass the recruiting company. Nice, thank you.
I have.
I mean, I would be afraid I might be
Trish has a problem.
try that.
I got some pushback here as an agency. I work agency, and here's the pushback. Sure, you can call the company, but my boss has an established relationship for 10 years with that hiring manager. And maybe you're not the perfect fit for that position, but I can call because I have a relationship with hiring manager Susie Q and have a conversation with them and say, look, I know he's not exact, but he's worked under this engineer at such and such company on this tape doing this project. What do you think? Let's take a look. Well, maybe he's not a fit for this position, but you have another position with another hiring manager. Let's talk to that hiring manager. I know him from the conference I was just at last week.
Yeah,
There's
given choice, I would always work through a recruiter because you can have honest, candid conversations with them and kind of get an inside scoop on what's going on. And
you want to figure out the leverage
The thing
point.
about that is that
What's the leverage point that works, right? And in some cases, it's you reaching out to a hiring manager that you know has the job and asking an honest question about how the job has been branded, and you saying, I believe this job might be represented by this agency, but it's also on your website. I'm excited. Thanks so much in advance for your insight on how I should do. By the way, I can call Trish and introduce myself if that's the best thing. If anything, you've made a sound decision. You're certainly coming off as professional. And now you're waiting on a relationship that could develop with a hiring manager that says, hey, thanks so much for the call. Yeah, you know what? Talk to Trish and I'll make sure that she talked to you. Right? That's just my take.
Rafiq, did you have anything to say? You were trying to say
I
something.
was going to respond to Trish. We are in a reality where there are about 300 million recruitment agencies out there where they might not even have any established relationship with the company that they claim to be recruiting on behalf of. How do you deal with that?
Well, my boss has been in the recruiting industry for over 22 years with the same firm.
I'm not talking about your particular example. I'm talking about I, as a job seeker, get 5 emails per job from different recruitment agencies. Some that are not even based in the US, where they have no idea who or have any sort of contact with company X. So I'm trying to figure out if I don't follow up with company X and I rely on the recruiter, and I run into the problem that the recruiter doesn't know anything about company X any more than I do.
Well, honestly, I've never, this is my first recruiting job and I wasn't groomed like that. So I'm not familiar with companies that don't know about the company that they're an agency for. I mean, that's crazy to be working for a company and you don't know anything about the company. Certainly I, as a candidate, don't want to work for that company or even talk to that recruiter if you don't even know your client. Like I tell everybody, this is the example. You buy a dress from Walmart and everybody's wearing the same dress from Walmart, right? Sure, it's great, but I'm going to get the recruiter that is J. Crew dress because nobody's going to be wearing that dress when I go to the ball. You as the recruiter or the candidate has to research. And certainly I can't tell candidates how to hire, but look what I tell people. I said, look, why don't you go and look and see how they're involved in their community? Maybe you do research for them. certainly even I, as a person who's in the recruiting industry, I'm like you. There's a lot of agencies, but you just have to do research. And certainly if you have a recruiter like I have that works, that has been in the industry 22 years, and you can see who they're connected with and everything, then I would think you would go with that person. But, you know, there are a lot of recruiters out there, but typically you want to go with the one that has the most established, and the candidate should research that person.
I do think you have, I tell you what, the recruiting industry, so I'm a recruiter, but I also do a lot of talent acquisition consulting. I'm just going to be, and I'm a former HR leader. I will say that the recruiting industry, there's a low bar. If you have a phone, you can be a recruiter. I just had a recruiter that a peer of mine that was going to do a split fee. It's not about the length of time you've been in the industry. You have to be careful. And I am talking about some of my peers. So make sure you feel comfortable with them. And I do think, listen to what they're saying. If they do not know the client, go somewhere else. I think that you do have to be careful with my peer set out there. I'm going to be completely blunt with you. I've had people say that they're pimping my jobs. The bar is low. And I think right now with the space that recruiters are in, they're even going to get lower. And that is, I'm just going to be completely honest with you. So as those people that are looking for jobs, you have to take care of yourself first. And I'm just going to be completely blunt. And
I mean, you're spot on, Teresa. I mean,
I just had a client. I had a Pepsi guy, and they lied to my candidate. And I do the right thing all the time, even if I don't get a penny on a candidate. So
here's the thing that my boss told me. Let me just be honest. Here's the thing my boss told me when I started the job 9 years ago. Never in the recruiting industry. In fact, I hated recruiters because I got out of the Air Force after 8 years, and they said my resume sucked, and they sent me on my way. Can you imagine? That was my taste in my mouth for 20 years before I came in the recruiting industry. And here's what my boss says that I worked for 9 years. And I've been recruited for other companies. I have not left him at all. He says, it's not about the money. It's about taking the people and being honest and doing the right thing. And while there are some unscrupulous recruiters out there, I firmly believe that there are a lot of honest recruiters who really do truly take care of candidates. And my company wouldn't have been in business for 22 years if they were being scandalous. Yes, there are shady people out there, but there are a lot of recruiters that do care and do take the time. So yeah, I don't know who said that comment, and she was right. Research and take care of yourself. But you know, there are a lot of people who are honest. You're not in business for 22 plus years if you're scandalous.
And just realize the realities around. So look,
No.
I'm a fan of RPO. I'm a fan of agencies, right? I think that they all have purpose. Just realize that the numbers game is a numbers game. Most recruiters are put into a position where they're supposed to offer choice and selection to the hiring manager that offers the minimum amount of bias. So when I was doing recruiting, and I did recruiting a long time, it was 4 candidates, 2 men, 2 women. It was a diverse slate every time. And here's the thing. I would tell every single one of my candidates, you're going to be one of 4, and 3 of you are going to get the phone call back to me, from me, saying you didn't get it. And that's the reality, because only 1 can get the job. If you start having honest dialogues with somebody in recruiting like that, that's a great person to have a relationship with, because you started from a place of trust and honesty. The people who say to you, oh, don't worry, I'll find you the job and I'll blast your stuff all over the place and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Most of the time, my perception is they're kind of talking in your ear. Honesty and recruiting go together.
Yeah. So Amara, you got the last word. We're coming up on 7 o'clock. So go ahead.
Yeah. See, I have around 12 to 13 years experience in agency recruiting. I'm still working in agencies. So most of my experience, see, whenever we are working with clients, So we know a lot of hurdles. Whenever we are talking to the hiring managers, they have a lot of agents. They are working with a lot of agencies like us. So sometimes you won't get much information from the hiring manager about the position or whether interviews and a lot of other things. So we have faced the issues whenever the candidate is submitting, they're asking about the update or feedback, interviews, anything. 60% or 70%, we don't even hear back from the client.
Wow.
So then we cannot call each candidate, no, we didn't get back or something issues. So this is the main hurdle we are facing in the agency. When you are running the agency, when we are working as a recruiter in the agency, they have a lot of issues. Unless only few of the clients, they will come back to you, they will update. Otherwise, most of times they may say the position is on hold, or otherwise they took the candidate internally and something happened. Sometimes they will take long time. So, we don't know, after 1 month, they may come up.
So you're doing more staff aug work like on large vendor lists?
Yes.
I mean, that is the problem when you're doing, you're one of 30 vendors and you're working with an MSP program and you don't have the direct client, manager contact. That's why they're in place. It's when you're with the smaller mid-sized companies, maybe, where you have more opportunity to have direct contact, or if you're doing a statement of work, where managed services.
Even though if you have direct contacts also, sometimes what happened, they're working with the 3-4 agencies. Okay. So then sometimes they may have the time, sometimes they won't even look about that, and they may say, no, we are still looking, we already have the resumes, we are reviewing it. Like it's 50-50. We cannot expect 100%. 100% they are going to come back.
Yeah, I get your situation. The one I had was, the things that I had are different situations where they personally have a candidate and they choose not to submit this candidate, even though it's a CPG person. They know they're going to be a dead ringer, and the head guy knows that this person lies. I mean, it's just like kind of down and low dirty stuff, but I totally get you're in a different situation. So I was not like I actually just worked with a group that supports me on split fees and stuff like that. So I get your situation. You're in a totally different situation, but
wow, that kind of escalated interestingly. I bet. So Lynn, who had to bug off, she's like, "Man, this is intense. When are you going to say to everybody, take a drink?"
Yeah, I was going to say, when is that cocktail?
So Elizabeth just left, but Ray, what'd you think? Any comments before we end?
First of all, I wanted to thank everyone. I thought the input was incredibly valuable. And look, there's a lot to process here, right? Which are the best methods to reach out in your job search, and how focused? I mean, Andrew, I really enjoyed your overview of of the analytics, and I think that was extremely important. And I just think that there's a lot of ways to get hired. I mean, whether it's reaching directly to the HR manager or the recruiting manager, but also the fine balance between an agency. But at the end of the day, you have to have a clear strategy, what you want, and then really galvanize the appropriate support to achieve that goal. So whatever that may be. But I would also say that, this is a total new environment. I don't think you can really compare this hiring environment to previous years. You have so many people that are searching for jobs that are not going to be rehired in their former jobs, and they're willing to take on a different job that you might be pursuing, but they might have, significant qualifications. So there's a lot of wood that we have to chop to have a point of difference. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it has to be well thought out. And I think that, just listening to everyone's input, I think that it kind of illuminated a lot of things to me. So love to, certainly talk in the future of how we can support each other. So, and I thank all of you.
Thank you, Ray.
No, thanks, Ray. I appreciate you. It was great to have new folks on, and Mary, you were awfully quiet. So hopefully you got a lot. So for next week, we're start at 5, and I kind of want to do an open mic night next week, just to let people kind of pick some different topics they want to talk about. And so I'll put that word out there, and maybe we'll do a sing off or a dance off or something funkier. Have a little fun, especially after this. I might need another drink, Mr. Godomsky.
Can
Andrew,
I bring my cat?
Yeah, bring your cat, please.
Michael, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the invite. And to all of you, I really enjoyed tonight's dialogue. Thank you so much for making the end of my day put a smile on my face. It's a difficult time for everybody, and I know we're all under self quarantine and all the things, but I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Guys, we'll see you next week.
All right now.
And y'all take care. Bye.
Bye now.
Good night.
Bye-bye now.
Hey, Michael, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, can you chat for a minute?
Yeah, hold on. I'm just going to. I think Mary stepped away from her computer, so I am just going to remove her. Yeah, there I am.
Oh my God.
That was an intense conversation. And do you know Teresa?
No.
So she does, I think, accounting and I have to look at her profile, either accounting and finance or maybe IT. She's just a different breed of person, the way she goes about it. And I should have stepped in, and it's my bad. I should have stepped in and said, look, listen, those who choose to do agency versus those who do corporate, everyone has good and bad points. Let's move on. I think I let it go too long, but I think it also gave, it was interesting, though we had a couple of people that weren't in weren't in recruiting, they really got a peek inside behind the curtain tonight. I think if we had had more job seekers, this would have been a hell of a informative session. So